Welcome, Elders Climate Action visitors and members, to our monthly national call for June. My name is Mark, and I am privileged to be one of 3 co-chairs of ECA's Education Committee. At the risk of repetition, our gracious presenters are invited based on your feedback, but also on the United States Climate Action Network's vision for equitable climate action, or VICA for short. These sectors include agriculture, electricity, infrastructure, manufacturing, transportation, and more. Equity is intended to be woven through all the sectors. As a single but important element of equity, it is desired that a common phrase such as clean energy be replaced with the phrase justly sourced renewable energy. And maybe this phrase could be repeated in the chat section of this Zoom call for the benefit of all. This event will last for about an hour. Generally, the next 50 minutes or so will be presentation followed by Q&A, and we will close out in the last 5 minutes. Please post your questions to Q&A and not in chat. With that, I am also privileged to introduce Tiffany Fant, and the title of her presentation is Allyship with the Red, Black, and Green New Deal. In case you're wondering, red, black, and green are the very same ordered top to bottom horizontal colors of the Pan-African flag. Tiffany is a proud native of Charlotte, North Carolina, who has served her community as a volunteer, assisting various initiatives designed to build better neighborhoods. During the Charlotte uprising in 2016, where protests that lasted for 3 days in the wake of the fatal shooting of a 43-year-old African-American man, Tiffany realized that a comprehensive strategy was needed for change and that the strategy would need to be community-based and led. With this in mind, Tiffany created the Ubuntu Community Development Project. And Ubuntu is essentially free software for the widest possible audience, but it was to help implement strategies necessary for change and impact. She also has a regional and national footprint in climate and environmental justice through the Charlotte-based nonprofit Soul Nation, where environmental justice and social justice intersect, creating a new home for climate justice. Tiffany, I realize there's so much more to you, but thanks for sharing with us, and please take it from here.
Thank you, Mark, for the introduction. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me tonight. It's always great to share opportunity with the work that I do with others and build connection, because it's going to take all of us to come up with solutions. I was prepared more for not necessarily webinar. So for those out there listening, so keep your fingers on your chat, because I may ask you to drop a chat or two just so it can be interactive. So if you all can work with me there, that would be great. So just to share a little bit about me, I am from Charlotte, North Carolina. I am a native, and I live on the west side of Charlotte. You know, I always say west side all day, every day, which is a predominantly Black neighborhood that has been divested from for decades here in Charlotte. So I always showed up in my community because things needed to be done. You know, I lived there, so, you know, you volunteer, come with a group of people, and you rah about whatever needs to be done. Whether it was housing, crime, the creek, just anything that needed to be done, right? So I really didn't come into the environmental world, really honestly, until about 5-6 years ago. And I met someone who was like, yeah, there's this thing over here impacting your community in the same demographic. And I was like, oh, wow, really? Who knew, right? So my pathway in the climate came just by wanting to have a better community. You know, I want to be able to eat, work, live, and play in my community. Currently, we don't have access to necessarily fresh food, can't shop here, and all the things. So from there, I ventured into part of USCAN. Soul Nation was developed because we realized what good is saving the world if we still have all these social justice issues, and what good are solving all the social justice issues if there is no healthy, clean world to live in. So we wanted to marry the two, and that's how Soul Nation was developed with my co-executive director, Nikisha Glover. And from there, I realized just how few Black people were in the environment world, but yet was the most impacted communities, right? And so a lot of my work was spent in spaces just sharing the stories because I am of community, in community. So I'm not someone who comes in and say, what's the problem? Versus I live in the communities that are impacted. So like it's impacting me as well as being an advocate. Um, so with that, I became almost like a commodity because it's like, what's the story? How do you all feel? Like, what needs to happen? And so, like, serving as the voice and telling the stories uh, of my neighbors in other communities like mine to say, this is what it looks like, this is what it feels like, and we do care about what's going on, but you just got to say it in a manner in which people can understand. Because if you're concerned about feeding your family, having a job, thinking about the particulate matter in the industries that's coming in the community is so far off because of the everyday issues that you have to deal with. So that's kind of like my pathway. It wasn't a direct pathway where I knew it was a thing I wanted to do. I went to school at Appalachian State to become a PR professional. So I am far part of the course with that, and I minored in accounting, so I'm even further away from that. Um, so it was not a direct path way into this. And so tonight, like I want to talk about just being an ally, right, with the Red, Black, and Green New Deal. Because in a lot of the work, a lot of the questions that I've gotten from organizations that were, and I'm quite frank and open and honest and love dialogue, just because I feel that we got to cut to the chase if we're really going to get to solutions. So, and it's never anything to be offended, to offend, by no stretch of the imagination. So, like, I am open to conversation and hope that you all feel comfortable asking me questions as well. But in a lot of predominantly white spaces, it was well, how do we get to community? Because we're trying to figure it out. We want to, they're not responding, they're not showing up, and this is killing them. And it's like, understand that. But what does it look like to be an ally? What does it mean? Right? I think that was the question. How do we go in and work with communities to help them get to solutions, or help us advance what we know to be problems and getting the support of community, right? So if anybody has the opportunity, the people that are there, like, what are your thoughts on what an ally is? If you can take a moment. If the chat doesn't start popping, then I'll keep it moving. So I'll just give you about 30 seconds to see if anybody, or what do you think an ally is, or what should an ally be? And just in the concept around climate justice and going into like predominantly Black and brown communities. So this is why the seminar, I thought it was going to be like the Zoom where I could see everyone. But we'll use the chat feature nonetheless. All right, so y'all are kind of quiet. That's cool too. Like, we can keep it moving. But typically the ally is someone that works with, right? Works alongside, an accomplice, a whole. Yes, I love that. Okay. Joining forces across sectors. Okay. Working together to make sure everyone in the community is okay. Absolutely, all that. Amplifies a message, stands in support of others. Absolutely, all those things, right? All of those things. And but what we were finding, that the basis of allyship and how to do it, a lot of nonprofits or organizations, they weren't building relationship, right? Think about, I said, I like to bring it down to, if someone comes over your house, right, knocks on your door, you open the door, they walk in, go in your refrigerator. Me, as a matter of fact, you all don't know me. I come to your house, I just go in your house, I'm in the refrigerator fixing me something to drink, and I'm sitting down here and say, hey, let's talk about this budget and how you're going to pay your bills. Are you really getting ready to talk to me about how to budget and pay your bills if I haven't really introduced myself? You haven't invited me in. We haven't gotten to know each other. And that's kind of how a lot of organizations go into these communities, right? They come in, they know it's a problem. It's a big industry coming in, wood pellet industry coming in. We know it's a problem. And they say, hey, we're getting ready to do this. We're getting ready to advocate. We're going to city council. You need to show up. This is going to be the solution. But no one's asked them, how do you feel about this? What are your thoughts? How has this impacted your community? How has this impacted your family? Right. And so it creates a distance that people who have the most well-intentioned and pure intentions to help and support lose their audience by not building a relationship. Right. The work is definitely important, but we also have to remember that they're people. That when you come into communities, that there are genuine people who have lived experiences that want to be heard before they can move, to get the solutions, right? And that's what I find. Like I have the fortunate to be able to work locally in Charlotte, across the state of North Carolina, and then nationally with the Red, Black, and Green New Deal. And so what the Red, Black, and Green New Deal has done is kind of created this platform where typically organizations would have to come in, find out what community wants, try to develop a plan. But what we've done is we've done the work with the frontline communities, our Black communities, and put it into a platform of 6 pillars where we deal with democracy, water, energy, land, labor, and economy, right? So it's no more figuring out really, right, what community wants, what they look for, right? We have from the Deep South to the Gulf South to Eastern voices represented in this platform. And what I'll do is I'll drop the Red, Black, and Green New Deal. There is a website for it, and I'm going to drop it in the chat for you to be able to check out the platform in its entirety. But what we've done is the legwork that most organizations are looking for. Because if we are doing this work, we know that the most impacted communities are Black and Brown. So we've done the work of gathering the voices, gathering the issues, and saying, hey, what is it that these communities want, and put it into a platform that is now available to everyone to say, hey, there is no more guessing. What does it look like to be an ally with Black and Brown voices now that are speaking for themselves? And this is what this platform does. And what we also understand is that we cannot do it alone, right? So that's why the platform has been developed, and developing it in a way in which Black and Brown voices are amplified, but creating a space for people who want to stand in support of and amplify voices, creating a space where they can do that is not so much of a calling out versus a calling in, right? Instead of saying, oh, you're not doing this right. No, we're creating space that if you're saying you're really looking for a solution and it's in these communities, we're creating space for you to come in to hear what we've said, hear what we've defined for ourselves, and to be able to listen, to internalize, and then to see how you can show up. And I know I'm speaking with the Elders Climate, and like we believe in intergenerational. Like there's a huge component that exists there of trying to make that bridge, right? Of understanding how things have been done and how things should be done. And that we're very clear that we need the wisdom of our elders, but we also need the fervence of our youth. I fall somewhere in between. I ain't young as I used to be, but I'm not old enough to be an elder, right? So I'm more of like a bridge. Like I'm kind of in the middle. So we are creating that space for that, right? For people to really have a very tangible way in which everyone can come into this work and really create change and not be so isolated and so siloed, and not having to figure out. And because when you really go in a community to build relationship, it takes about a year before you can actually get any real work done, right? So we cut that in half, say, you don't have to figure it out. Here's this and what that looks like. And then building what it is not, though, and being an ally, what it is not is coming in with a plan and solution already. That's what an ally is not, right? Saying we know we have this problem, we've sat around in our meeting, our education meeting, let's say, and we've come up with this plan. We have part A, B, and C. Here's the timeline, and here's the project, and then going into the community and say, this is what we've decided we're going to do. That's what an ally is not, because I found a lot of times that things happen to my community. We felt things was happening to us instead of with us. And so that happening to us means that you don't care what we say, what we have, and how we are, and our feelings about the situations, right? So what an ally is not come helicoptering in for a moment, here for 3-4 weeks, and we've done this thing, and then we leave, because it's almost like opening up a wound and then not providing any salve or any bandage, because opening up and leaving people to have to fend for themselves who may not necessarily be equipped to handle the things that are open. When you're taking on, like in North Carolina, South Carolina, taking on a Duke Energy, or if you're taking on the pipeline, this is not where you can come in for 3-4 weeks and expect people to actually be equipped to handle the intimidation that happens, or to handle the threats that happen by standing up against some of these organizations, especially in these rural Black communities where internet, they can't even send an email to say they're having a problem due to the digital disconnect. So an ally is not coming in with your own agenda and intentions, right? It's not being the savior. And when you start talking about race relations, like they say, that the white man's burden or the white savior complex, like it's not that. It is about coming in and hearing what community needs and being able to attempt to meet those needs, right? Like at Soul Nation, one of the things we do is we say environmental justice is, right? Environmental justice is, and we connect it to all of the social justice issues that exist, from education inequity to race equity to reentry, to say that this climate work for Black people, it transcends just the actual thing. I said, sometimes I call it a privilege just to care about, I consider it a privilege just to worry about how much particulate matter in the air, when you don't have to worry about how you're paying your bills, if you have access to food. It's a privilege just to say we need to reduce the amount of particulate matter. This is how it needs to happen, by driving less. Like I consider that just for me to be concerned about that would be wonderful. But I'm also have to concern myself. I have elderly neighbors, to make sure they're eating fresh food, right? So that's also my concern. And when you're going into these communities, that's part of the concern that has to happen if we're going to get to solution. It's concern yourselves with the other issues, the social justice issues. When you had this whole George Floyd situation that happened over a year ago, that was at front of mind for a lot of communities, right? So when you went into communities, we had to acknowledge what was happening on the social justice front just so we could get to the climate. So it's about concerning yourself with the whole person and not just the issue at hand, even though the issue at hand is really what we want to get to, right? And so as an ally, it's about learning the community that you're going into. It's about recognizing what they consider important before you get to what you're trying to see as important. We had a coal ash issue here in North Carolina, and where Duke Energy was burying coal ash all over the place and poisoning the water supply. And a lot of the community people did not care one way or the other. Did not care about coal ash and how it was affecting them. Didn't have an understanding that it is affecting our health, our water supply, our food supply. That was not a concern. But when we made the connection of, do you understand that your monthly electric bill is getting ready to go up? because they're getting ready to charge you to clean up a mess that they made. Their concern was my bank account is getting ready to be affected. And then we were able to back into this is what coal ash is doing as well. So this is how it can also affect your bank account in other ways if the water system has to now try to clean this water to make it safe to drink. And we were able to actually move people because I was concerned about how are you going to take care of your monthly bills. So sometimes you have to back your way into the issue when you're going into communities as an ally. We can't go in talking about coal ash, but I can go in talking about your electric bill going to go from $40 to possibly $100 a month. And can you really afford that? Okay, well, let's have a conversation about what we need to do, city council, advocacy groups, and how I need you to show up, how I need you to put your name on the line to say that you're against this thing. And that was a more effective way than going in just talking about the issue. So as an ally, we in community, and I say we because I live in the community, we need people to show up and organizations to show up and understand our humanity and relate as a human, and then getting to the issue. Because too often I think the humanity as well is lost. Being the PR person I was supposed to be with public relations, I understand how media dictates narrative, and so you get this. Especially in Charlotte on the west side, there's the street on main thoroughfare is called Babies Fort Road. And people, oh, I don't go over there. Oh, it's just unsafe. I'm like, well, I live here and I promise you, it's not as many gunshots as you think is happening. There's not, police cars running up and down the road. As a matter of fact, it's usually super quiet over here. But once they have one incident and they run it in the news cycle on every station for at least the 24 to 48 hours, you think it's a war zone over here. I said, but that's not necessarily the case. So understanding that when you go into these communities as an ally, that people they have children that they love, they have family members that they love, and understanding that they have the same concerns. And I don't know of any parent that says, I want my child to live in an unsafe neighborhood. I don't want my children to have good schools to go to. Haven't met a parent yet, rich or broke. I haven't met one yet. So like going into work, especially around climate, with that understanding that even though some of these people do not have the most of anything, that they still want the best for themselves and their community, but just may not know how to do it. And as an ally, we tap into that, right? And bringing your full self. One of the things that we also that I also advise as an ally is bring yourself and offer yourself first, because in this climate world, it's so extractive. It's so extractive, just from the processes with extracting from the earth, but also in how we show up in community. It's like, Tiffany, can I pick your brain? Tiffany, can you come here and give us this? And that offer yourself first. Hey, we're here to really offer and see how we can support in community, instead of always constantly looking for the survey, looking for what we can get from in these extractive practices, especially in going into Black and Brown communities where either it has already done the brain drain, extracted all of the resources, whether it's physical or human capital, that it's when you go in with an offering of yourself. And people are more likely to open once they know that it's not you coming to take from. As an ally, is to reverse the practices that has gotten our country, our climate to where it is, which is extractive. I think lastly, like with Red, Black, and Green New Deal, we are looking for ways in which, because these are frontline communities that have come together, as an ally to Red, Black, and Green, is showing up with resources on how to get information out. Like, we're looking for the data. We're looking on how to roll out information and getting all of the data that's needed. Like a lot of organizations have access to resources that we just don't as frontline communities. We have a passion, we have a desire, and sometimes you know, like when you talk about some of the big greens, they have all the resources. They want to help. They say they're wanting help to help frontline communities, but sometimes the trickle down policy doesn't work as far as resources are concerned and getting information. So an ally to Red, Black, and Green and say these are the resources that we can offer to get your message out, to get the data that you need, to amplify this messaging. And that's something that we're currently just coordinating right now. Like I wish we could say we had this huge staff of like 15, 20, 30 people, but we got about like 3 to 5 people that's really pulling this together. Right. About 3 to 5 people pulling this all together. So being an ally means understanding that we have the desire, but also need the support around being able to do what it takes to influence the right people, because this is just a platform. So now we got to get to the policy and codify this platform and tap on the right shoulders and put the right pressures in place to make sure we get things through to make sure that the climate is at the forefront of change. And yeah, so allyship is going to be key. And as far as what we have with Red, Black, and Green, I'm going to drop another link for you. We actually have an interest form where we are literally recruiting for our allies. Like we're very clear that we're going to need everyone's support. Right? Even though Red, Black, and Green is definitely a Black-led and for Black communities, we also understand that it's going to be non-Black people to help us get it across the threshold. And so the form that I just dropped is a interest form that is for anyone who wants to be a part, to say, hey, this is where I can support, this is where I would like to show up. And Gulf South Center for Law and Policy is bottom lining the Green New Deal. And Emma, she is a non-Black person, so she is over all of our allies, that she answers all the questions and try to help organize and share the information. So the action, I was told that you all like to have an action with presentation. The action is saying joining the forces as an ally for the Red, Black, and Green New Deal, because there's so many areas in which we would need support to get a lot of things across the finish line, and to really create where we're not into a moment, but into a movement. So like joining the movement, pushing the movement that's already started and saying, this is what Black voices are looking for. Because we say, if we get it right with Black people, we'll get it right with everyone. A lot of people don't understand that or may not believe that, but we have been the most impacted in this country. So if we get it right here, everyone's going to benefit. Like no one would be left behind if we get this right. So I do encourage you all to do the form and join us as we continue to grow this out and continue to roll out the Red, Black, and Green New Deal to everyone. And there's also a summit that you all can also look at, where we kind of go into depth each pillar that we have. And I just dropped that link. It's about an hour and a half, so it gives you all of the meat of Red, Black, and Green New Deal and why it's so important, how all of the issues are so interconnected. And I invite you all to take a look at that, and also so you can have a better understanding of where we're coming from and what the platform is designed to do. And I would be willing, so as an ally, I'm willing to go ahead and entertain questions. I think I see 2 that popped up, maybe. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Jen.
I actually have one question for you.
Okay.
I've been trying to learn more about the Red, Black, and Green New Deal, and I've some of the Black Climate Wednesdays. And are you familiar with?
Yes, Valencia Gunder runs that. She's the national organizer.
Right. And what I think is really great about it is that that each of those, it seems that you're sort of looking at two of the pillars at a time and really kind of breaking down. And I've really enjoyed those. One of the things that came out of, one of the things that I learned out of that experience is that, that the Red, Black, and Green New Deal and Movement for Black Lives are really looking for a change in language, as Mark mentioned at the very beginning of the call, and in reference to how we refer to the energy transformation, and that the terminology that they're really calling on to use is the justly sourced renewable energy instead of the words clean energy. And I just wonder if maybe you can talk a little bit about that, you know, coming to that term, that terminology, and what that terminology represents.
Okay, my primary focus is land, but I know a lot of that is based that when we say clean energy, right? A lot of, like, if we take biomass, for example, they consider that to be clean energy with the wood pellet industry. But when it takes clear cutting our forests to actually create this energy, is it really clean at that point? And especially with the chemicals, even though it's wood burning, so it's cleaner, but the effects that it has on communities, as far as from flooding to the chemical processing that it takes for the biomass industry, that clean sometimes gets lost in the other effects that can happen, right? So justly sourced renewable energy means that not having the negative effects as it does, like, let's say something like what the wood pellet industry does, like not having the negative effects, being just in how it shows up in how it affects communities and the other ramifications. Like, for example, here in Charlotte, we have yard waste, right? So they're saying, hey, we're going to have a more sustainable way to collect this. We want you to get paper bags and put all your yard waste in paper bags, right? But we know how these paper bags are now made. So is it really sustainable? Is it really just for Black communities when you realize that the amount of cancer that is a direct result of these industries being in the community? So a lot of that I know is based in that, but unfortunately, energy is not my lane. Now, when you start talking land and forest, that's where I start to shine. But a lot of it is just understanding how the extractive practice and eliminating a lot of the extractive practices that causes more harm in producing it than it does the good. So yeah, Black Climate Wednesday is good. That's with Valencia Gunder, and she's the national organizer for Red, Black, and Green New Deal.
All right, so Jen, should I ask some of the questions then? Thanks, Jen, for your questions. Thanks, Tiffany, for your comments. I think it was really interesting. It's really relevant to, I think, what a lot of members of ECA are thinking about is this idea of allyship. And I think we can use a lot of direction about how to go about it. There are a few questions in the Q&A, and then if we still have time, I have a few questions myself.
Okay.
So I'll be polite and let the others go first. So Roger wants to know, is there a climate organization that specifically represents minority communities in the US that are located in low elevation regions which will be affected by sea level rise?
I know the Gulf Center for Law and Policy, they are in Louisiana. Colette Pichon Battle is ED of that, and she's also leading Red, Black, and Green New Deal. So that is one organization, and then the People's Justice Council in Alabama with Reverend Michael Malcolm as well. So those are two organizations that I know that are really dealing with the low-lying areas.
Yeah, actually, we've had, I think Colette was one of our speakers, right? And Michael must have been a speaker before I joined, but I know that we have connections with People's Justice Council also. And I'm at Cornell. I said I invited both of them to talk at Cornell this year after hearing them in ECA. So that was fun.
Yeah.
So Leslie says, when we don't live in or near a Black-brown community and so can't engage directly, how can we provide support without seeming to be aliens who are parachuting in?
I love it. I would say join an organization, a support an organization that does, right? That align with your values around how they show up in community. And like, well, first of all, the easiest way, right, is to donate money. Okay. Like money, I wish this work was cheap and easy. If it can't be easy, at least let it be funded. So like donating is the easiest thing to an organization of the work that you like that they're doing, and the solutions that they're providing. But then also joining organizations that have the relationship, right? So that way, when you come in, you're coming in and having a transfer of trust. So if that organization's already built the relationship already in community, so that transfer of trust happens because you're coming into the organization versus coming in as an individual. And if you're brazen enough, you can always visit communities and just be in community, right? If you're brazen enough to show up to community events or become a mentor. So just be in community in that manner by providing a service, like just traditional volunteer services. But yeah, donating money or joining an organization that's doing the work and being a supporter of them.
And just to follow up, so sort of if you're in just about any community in the US, do you think there would be an appropriate organization to show up at events for? Or is the sort of distribution of allied organizations or organizations that support the Black, New Deal? Is it
like, so right now, I mean, I think they're like in any community, you're going to find an organization that's doing work, right? And it's just about like the easiest, right? Volunteer at a YMCA, right? Like that's like one of the easiest ways to get into community because a lot of YMCAs are in Black and brown communities. Right? So the easiest non-threatening way to get in is to show up at YMCA, put you in community with the young people and their families, and they have community events and that are nationwide, right? So that's one of the easiest ways. And then if you want to be more deeply embedded, then you go and find who's doing work in this community. So that may actually mean getting out and walking and speaking to people, finding elders and other local organizations that are in community to if you want to become more deeply embedded. So it's just on how far you want to go and how comfortable you are in doing it, to be honest.
So it's not like trying to find the climate organization that has leadership from people of color. It's trying to find the community organization that is embedded in the Black community or.
Yeah, because what we found is that there are not a lot of Black climate leaders. Like when it comes to showing up, I am seeing the exact same people in all of the spaces until like we're tired. So sometimes it's about finding the organization and you bringing that education to them, you know, and saying, hey, love what you're doing. Have you thought about your air quality, your water quality? What are your thoughts around that? Or this industry is here. This is their effects. Let's talk about that. So sometimes it's about bringing the information to them once you're in community.
Okay, thanks. That's really helpful. We have a question for Beverly Ward, and she says, I have an opportunity for a presentation during the United Nations High Level Political Forum, 6th through 15th of July, 2021, via Quaker Earth Care Witness. Who should I contact with either Soul Nation or Red, Black, Green New Deal regarding interest? Okay,
Soul Nation. Well, I guess I am co-executive director, so I guess you could contact myself. And Red, Black, and Green, I would say contact either Colette Pishon Battle or Valencia Gunder. And I can drop Valencia's email into chat. And it's Valencia Gunder, who is our national organizer. And then Colette Pishon Battle. I don't know if do you all have the information
Yeah.
for her? Okay. I can say Colette's email is, so those two for Red, Black, and Green New Deal would be helpful.
So I have a question, and that is, what is the relationship of your organizations to the Climate Justice Alliance?
The Climate Justice Alliance.
Mm-hmm. Are you
not familiar with Climate Justice Alliance, and who would that be through?
Jen, do you know more about them? Can you help us out?
I don't know a lot about the Climate Justice Alliance, actually.
Yeah.
Well, my understanding, it's like, I mean, we could, maybe Jen, you could put the link in the chat, but that it's umbrella organization of 75 environmental justice or climate justice organizations. And I think a lot of them are led by people of color.
Okay.
So,
yeah, I'm not familiar with Climate Justice Alliance. We are with the Black Climate Alignment Network, which is a network of climate leaders and organizations. It was birthed at USCAN, the United States Climate Action Network. But it started there, but it's a national organization, and we're also looking to go global. And then we work closely with Red, Black, and Green New Deal because BCAN is more of a place for respite and relationship, because a lot of Black climate leaders are finding that we are the only person of color, and then definitely the only Black person in a lot of these climate spaces. So that's like a place of respite, education, and building up to go back out and do the work. So Climate Justice Alliance, I would be interested in finding. So to answer the question, we don't have a relationship. But interested in always the networks that are out there.
Okay.
So I would definitely look into that. So no relationship right now.
I don't know if Francis knows anything more about Climate Justice Alliance or Mark. Oh, okay. I guess
That's what's on the website.
Okay. So my other question is kind of longer to explain, I guess, and that is, I feel like, I think the environmental justice movement sort of started in North Carolina amongst communities of color. Although I'm in New York State, we sort of say it started at Love Canal, but whatever. I mean, certainly a lot of people traced it back to the community. I forget the name of the community in North Carolina, rural community.
Yeah.
And then, for a long time, it's the sort of narrative has been, that the environmental movement is very white, and Dorcetta Taylor's work, I think, she looked at leadership of the main climate organization, environmental organization, very, very white. But really this last year, as I've been kind of exploring this space, I feel like that, that you're not alone, Tiffany, like that there's a number of other Black, and especially women. And so I feel like that the narrative is, the reality, maybe not the narrative is changing, but that there's a transition going on, which I don't quite understand. I don't quite understand how to talk about it, but I don't feel like that the environmental movement is all white at this point. And maybe it's climate is a different issue than environment. So maybe it has to do with climate that's making, causing the transition. So I just don't know if you have any thoughts about that, or.
I think what it is I think we are connecting. Black climate leaders are now, we're actively seeking to connect with each other, where that didn't happen before, right? And I think just the climate that we're in nationally, and just people becoming more aware around race relations and being more comfortable and leaning in, that people are taking a real look at themselves. Because still some of the Warren County is where we're talking about in North Carolina. But it's still, when you look at where the resources lie, it's still very white, right? Where the big greens are still white-led organizations that have the millions to do the work and are creating the narrative around what solutions look like. So in that sense, it very well still is. But I think right now, like even with the Climate Justice Alliance, like with a quick look on their website, I know one of the ladies that's in the picture because we actively try to seek out each other and create space. And I think what has happened is that we started creating place and space for ourselves, like a Climate Justice Alliance, a BCAN, Red, Black, and Green New Deal, where we collectively are amplifying ourselves. It's like, oh, I'm not the only one. Okay. And this space now exists where if you're, let's say, if you all have one Black elder in your organization, they may feel like they're the only one.
Right.
Because when they look around, there are no other Black elders. But when you go to a place that's created, you see there are other Black elders that are working on this climate. They're just not a part of my organization. So I think that's probably what's happening, is that people are becoming more conscious of the makeup of their organizations to be more intentional. And then Black climate leaders are being more intentional about seeking out each other to offer support, resources, to say that we do exist outside of ourselves.
And do you think it's something about the climate that's different from the environmental movement that is, I mean, is there, really a lot more interest amongst Black communities or communities of color in climate maybe than there was in environment? Maybe it's more of a social, it kind of relates to social justice issues maybe more than environment did.
I think what it is right now, like environmental justice has that component of environmental racism in it. And so that is something that people can resonate with when you start talking social justice, because you say environmental racism, and we know racism as it exists in social justice. So it's an easy translation for more people to become aware of it. Whereas when you're talking on the climate justice level, where it's more about the science, more about the issues, you have to really be involved in understanding on what those things mean. And it doesn't necessarily resonate when you say like environmental racism. Oh, I know what racism means. So what's the environmental component to it type thing. So I think that's part of it, of the understanding and how people relate to different terms. So at Soul Nation, we say we're translators. So we try to translate the message so that people can understand and relate in a way that can cause movement and action.
Okay, thank you. Jen, you had a question. Do you want to just unmute yourself? You want me to read your question? There you go.
I can unmute myself. I was wondering, I hear a lot of the messaging around Red, Black, and Green New Deal coming out of Movement for Black Lives. Is there a number of organizations that are kind of like are in coalition together to work on Movement for Black Lives, or work on the Red, Black, and Green New Deal? And if so, what are some of those other organizations? Because that might be places some of our members want to become members of and connect with, and might actually lead to connections in their own local areas.
Yeah, so what is Movement for Black Lives is like the body that is holding the Red, Black, and Green New Deal. It's a table of Movement for Black Lives. That's one of the reasons it's situated in Movement for Black Lives. And then to answer your question, yes, it's multiple organizations and individuals that's working on the Red, Black, and Green New Deal. I think right now our working group probably consists of about 60 to 70 people that shows up to meetings and things. And so like it's difficult because some of them work at white organizations, but because they're Black, they're here. So it's so it's very, like I wish I could have just a list and say, hey, this is it. But it's more about I'm Black and want to be in this space. And so they're showing up. And that's why we have the Ally Network. So it's saying like, you don't necessarily have to join the organization, but there's going to be a whole strategy built around our allies to be able to activate and move the red, black, and green New Deal as well.
Perfect. So that actually really does sound like the best portal to making those connections. Is
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Allied action. Excellent.
Absolutely. Yeah. Definitely it is. Just because the way it is, because RBG is like a Black space. The only non-Black face in the space is Emma, who is the person that's leading the allies. So she was able to get the information and take the information back to allies and say, this is what it looks like. This is how we need to move, type situation. So yeah, definitely, that is definitely the best portal to support RBG.
Thank you.
So we have a question from Frances, and she's in the Maryland, Virginia, DC area. And she says, a coalition I'm working with has reached out to NAACP chapters and have had a good response. In other areas, would you recommend reaching out to the NAACP? Are there other groups other than local ones that you would recommend contacting?
Recommend reaching out to other groups in that area.
So she's saying other than local groups. So Frances, you can unmute yourself, but I'm assuming you're meaning like national groups.
I mean,
Okay.
local groups are great, but we've got a national audience here. So the local group in one area won't be the local group in another area. In the coalition I'm working with in Maryland, once we got enough money to actually be able to hire a staff person, we hired an amazing Black woman who some of you all have heard on our national call, Wandra Ashley Williams, as our state organizer. And Wandra has very deep roots in the NAACP. So we reached out to a number of groups, but of all different types. But one of our best responses was from the NAACP, probably because Wandra had very deep connections there. So I was wondering for other places, what you might recommend.
Okay. I would definitely recommend, I'm trying to think of the organization that Dr. Robert Bullard has, which is an environmental justice organization, and they focus on policy. Go ahead, Jen. I'm trying to get the right name of it. But so it has like him, Jackie Patterson, who was with NAACP Environmental Justice. So, and they specifically focus on policy. And I'm gonna try to Google it right quick to get it. But then, so that would be a great organization because they are national. Black Climate Alignment, US, actually US Can, I don't know if you all are part of US Can. US Can it's great because they have a specific focus on like minority organizations, right? And very intentional and conscious. So US Can is always good. They support a lot of our work. And that's where Black Can was birthed out of, was US Can. So definitely US Can. And so like national, like really national, there really aren't too many like Black-led national organizations. They're more regional. Go ahead, Jen.
I think it's Center for Race, Poverty, and the Environment. Is that correct?
Maybe. Oh man.
I know. I was just on a webinar earlier last week, I believe, with him, and I'm trying to dig through my memory.
Yeah, it was with him. Reverend Malcolm was moderating that one. Yeah.
Such a great webinar. Yes.
Yeah, and I think Adrienne Hollis is a part of that. So it's like a lot of the what we would call old heads in the Black justice, climate justice movement are a part of this organization. So yeah, so if I get it, I would definitely shoot it out. But they would definitely be an organization, and those really are the national ones outside of NAACP. To be honest with you, and most of the rest are either like on a state level or a regional level. Even though we try to be national.
And one thing I did didn't realize when I started working with the NAACP is that they really have a lot more going on in environment and climate than I had any idea about.
Oh yeah, like Jackie Patterson was great. She was over that arm of the national. Yeah, she had a finger on the pulse. She's part of Black Can. She's part of US Can. So like she's a part of all the things that you will find.
You know, and I don't know if Jen or Mark or Francis want to comment on this, but I think as ECA as an organization, I think we're like around 90% white or 91%, something like that. And that's been a concern, but I also feel uncomfortable like reaching out, you know, because it's like, come and join my organization, but it takes time to join an organization. And so I'm wondering if there's another way we could think about this in terms of this idea about allyship. And maybe, you know, if the goal is sort of to support, you know, the voices of people of color, maybe it's instead of thinking about, oh, how can we recruit for ECA, it's more how can we form allyship with other organizations. And I'm not sure what that would mean. We're a national organization and we have, I don't know, 15 state chapters. So some states are really active, but most states were, you know, it might be members, but they're not organized other than at the national level. So I'm not sure if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one, we always have to take self-reflection, you know, like, do we create a culture and have we done the outreach that that's inviting for people to want to join? And then when you start talking about Black elders, what has their experience been when it comes to like race relations, right? Because I think there is work that has to be done there when you start talking about between like, you know, people of color elders and white elders. You know, like that's a whole thing that we haven't even discussed or hasn't even been brought to the forefront. As you all are trying to work to make change, there are Black elders coming to make change, but you all came up in the same era. And what were those experiences that Black elders may not want to work with, you know, so building with white elders, right? And so what does it look like to be able to bridge and create that trust among those who are trying to create change? So like, that's a whole other elephant that I think that we haven't even really touched on, that it creates a barrier for you all when you're really out here wanting to do work. Good intentions is like, okay, how have we shown up? What has our experience been? But then also understanding why wouldn't a Black elder might want to come join this organization, considering that we grew up in the same era? What was happening during that era? What would their experience have been to say, hey, I now want to work with? So yeah, I think one way definitely, one is that self-reflection, but then also creating allyship, like you said. So being said, instead of saying trying to get our membership to be more diverse, which definitely would be helpful, but saying that we understand that we have some challenges to getting to that diversity. We understand that, but in the meantime, can we be in allyship in a meaningful way as we begin to look at and you know, self-reflect on our organization? Because in that you may find ways in strategies and, you know what I mean, and things that can help you diversify. So it's about being authentic and understanding. It's a, hey, yeah, we're a really white organization. We get it. That's not lost on us, but we're not stopping there, right? It's not lost on us. So we're open, but at the same time, how can we show up to do this work together still as we figure this thing out over here?
That's really helpful. And I hadn't thought about that as elders, we're up against some challenges that maybe younger people aren't up against because of the very different situations we had when we were younger and growing up. So that was a really interesting perspective. And overall, it's I think it's 8 o'clock, but I just really, really appreciate you, you know, so frankly, sharing your perspectives and engaging in discussion. And
absolutely,
you know, we can continue discussion, and I'll just let Jen close us out. But yeah, thanks so much, Tiffany. It's really great.
Problem. Thank you.
Hi, I'll go ahead and close us out. First and foremost, Tiffany, thanks a lot for sharing your time with us. We really appreciate it. And to our visitors and members for participating, thank you as well. We will be doing something different from the national call format in July and August. Just wanted to give you a heads up about that. We plan a 3-part workshop, and the overall title is called the Climate Activist Toolkit. It will be held every other Wednesday, beginning July 28th and ending August 25th. And more information will be shared as soon as we can get that to you. We hope that you will find these workshops to be actionably practical, and we'll resume the national calls in September. And so that's all we have for you. Thanks again to all, and we hope you have a nice evening.